So this week has been extremely busy for me when it comes to Warhammer, because it turns out that both my armies have new codices coming out for them right now on the exact same weekend. And because of the price of Warhammer and my extremely small brain, damaged as it is from lead gasoline and social media, I can only choose one army to focus on. So I've been faced with a real Sophie's choice, right? Who shall I pick? Genestealer cultists or Sisters of Battle? Except, just like the real life Sophie's choice, this is a very easy decision to make. I'm choosing the girl to live, not the four-armed little monster. And that might sound callous, but there is a very good reason as to why I'm abandoning the Genestealers entirely and instead plowing all my hobby focus into Sisters of Battle. Because it turns out that there is a dark secret to this latest release. A sinister revelation about Games Workshop, one that has been suspected for a while, but was never truly confirmed before, until now. And the community is outraged as a result. Here's why. So with 10th edition Warhammer 40k, Games Workshop decided to do their codices in pairs. At the very beginning of the edition, we got the Space Marine Codex and the Tyranid Codex. Both were released together. And then the Adeptus Mechanicus and Necrons, then the Orcs and Adeptus Custodes, then Tau and Chaos Space Marines, and now Genestealer cults and Adeptus Sororitas. And along the way, people started to notice a pattern, a secret sequence that is pretty much a nightmare if you know, collect or play Warhammer 40k. And this was a pattern that could not be ignored, and I guarantee that if you're one of the unfortunates that have noticed it, it will consume your life, like finding out that everything is divisible by the number 23. You know, if Jim Carrey is to be believed, and he probably should be. He's a trustworthy guy, never said anything odd, ever. See, as much as these codices are like buses both coming out at the same time, they're not exactly equal. Instead, it seems like one of the codices always gets released in a really great state, coming with a ton of fun rules, powerful datasheets, and an internally balanced army. Mwah. Perfecto. But one always seems to be its shadow version, released in an absolutely game-breakingly terrible, unfun state. The book equivalent of razor blades being chewed up in the mouth. And a couple of codex releases ago, this started to get noticed by the community, leading to a bit of an urban legend that there are two teams at Games Workshop currently writing every single army codex. It is said that when your army is due to have a codex written for 10th edition, Kevin Roundtree flips a coin. You get the Codex writing team A and subsequently an amazing experience. Or tails, you get the horrifying Codex writing team B and subsequently fucked. Wait, are we sure that Kevin just isn't Two-Face? I mean, he sure likes those fucking coins, right? And as a result of this rumor, every single updated Codex release has always followed the same buzz in the weeks up to its release. There are always fearful whispers asking in the subreddits, on Twitter, in the streets. Which team is our army going to get? Who will be writing our codex? Will it be A or B? And to be honest, I've never really believed that this was real. It has always felt a bit like pareidolia, like we're all making a pattern out of mere coincidence, the way that you see faces on inanimate objects, or how the real Passion of the Christ seems to be showing up on burnt toast all the time. But, and I don't say this often, I was wrong. This weekend has made me a believer. Hallelujah, I have been converted. I have seen the light. You see, of the two releases this month, Sisters of Battle and Genestealer cults, I collect and play both armies. I know what both these armies need. I know the state of each of them. I am very, very, very familiar with both of them. I am playing both of them actively. I am aware of how fun or not they are to play right now. I know what they need. I know what a new codex should bring. And I have never before seen a more off-the-mark release in all of my years. There has never before been a starker difference between two codex releases ever. Because without a doubt, Sisters of Battle have come out of this codex release looking absolutely amazing. I am so excited to play them following the previews of their army. The internal balance of the new codex seems so good. Every unit is great. There are tons of new stratagems. Each new detachment sounds so fun. And okay, the faction lost a few units, but overall, this is a big win for Sisters. And the Sisters of Battle community, as a result, are on such a high right now. They're dancing in the streets. There's so much hype and excitement. Celebration! And then then we look over at the Gene Stealer cultist community, and it's like entering the birthday party of a terminally ill child who doesn't even know. He doesn't even know. Pretty much across the board, the faction has gotten less good, less fun, less interesting. The detachments are all hyper-focused on very niche gameplay. The internal balance is all over the place. The points values are too high for weak units, and as a glass cannon faction, we are now all glass. No cannon. It's obvious at this stage that there are two separate teams working on all the codices. I have been convinced of this, and it's clearly not working out. Things aren't great right now, but I have a solution. I think this is very solvable. Unfortunately, there's something worse happening here. Something even more terrifying. Something that is fundamentally breaking Warhammer. Something that needs to change or else, well, it's going to be a disaster. The problem is this is going to get worse and worse and worse, and it's happening right now as I speak in Nottingham by Games Workshop. Seriously. And it's horrible. And frankly, it's not really the way to do updates or produce games. No, if you really want to see how an update should really be done, you're gonna have to check out Port Royal by Firelock Games. They are currently running a Kickstarter for their new skirmish war game, Port Royal. In this game, you'll command a warband of pirates or Native Americans, privateers, African Maroons, French, or even the biggest bad of all, the Brits. Seriously, the Imperium has nothing on them, as you clash amongst the wreckage of a post-earthquake Jamaica in 1692. Good year. It's only $79 or £63 for the full core box set that comes with the rulebook, miniatures, terrain, mat, dice, and PDFs of all the books. It comes with beautiful hard plastic miniatures, and all of this is for a game with wicked gameplay based on many concepts found in the Blood and Plunder rule set, a game which I have played and reviewed and would totally recommend. I mean, it was featured on South Park, it's hard to beat that. Port Royal really reminds me of a better version of Mordheim. It's very campaign focused. You get to build your own company and crew, and you gain experience and upgrades between battles, and also you run the risk of mutiny. Plus, you get to explore the ruins of Port Royal and the surrounding jungles, dealing with falling buildings and wild animals and desperate civilians. And if that wasn't enough, it even comes with a full solo and co-op game mode as well. Plus, player v player. So how can you top that? It's got something for everybody. Check out the link in the description below. Go support an awesome company, and thanks to Firelock Games for sponsoring today's video. Okay, so there are two teams working on Warhammer codices. One seems to be good at their job, one seems to be bad at their job. I mean, how else do we explain it? Sisters of Battle got a ton of buffs, Gene Stealer Cultist got a bunch of nerfs, and it makes no sense. Sisters have been consistently winning tournaments recently, they've been doing okay competitively, they have strong units in their index, a fair amount of diversity in the top lists, their detachment rules are fun to play with, and overall, the Sisters community are really happy with the currently existing index army. In contrast, Gene Stealer cults are performing very poorly. They're a really weak army right now with a non-existent army rule since they got nerfed a few months back. They have limited viable strategies. They pretty much have only one way to play. They're expensive to collect. They are bottom of the rung competitively. And overall, the Gene Stealer community are right now managing with the index rules. So if anything, Gene Stealer should have gotten the Wunderbar Codex and Sisters should have gotten the weaker one. Clearly, whoever wrote the Gene Stealer Cult Codex has no idea what the faction needs. And that is the current narrative in the community. But it's wrong. As much as I've been convinced that there are two Codex teams, I don't think that there is a good team and a bad team. I think that is a mistake from the community. Instead, there is an alternative reason as to why these two codices are exactly the opposite of what we'd expect. And it's even worse than two teams with one good and one bad. Because if we cast our mind back to just a few months after the release of 10th edition, we were in a complete mirror universe as to where we are now. Gene Stealer cultists were dominating competitive tournaments. Their army rule, before it got nerfed, could bring back dead units 100% of the time. It was really fun to play with. They were also hard to play against, and ultimately they were extremely popular, certainly more popular than I've ever seen them before. A year ago, the world was burning, the Imperium was in tatters, and Ascension Day was nigh. In contrast, Sisters of Battle were fucking shit. Their units were ineffective, overcosted, people hadn't gotten a handle on the playstyle of the faction yet. The internal balance of their units were all off. People were spamming a limited selection of them. Generally speaking, times were tough for the Catholic Church in space. And so, while the new codices don't make a lot of sense sense in the current context of the armies where sisters are great and Genestealers suck, they make a lot more sense in the context of last year when sisters sucked and Genestealers ruled. And that ultimately reveals the real problem here. It's not the teams writing the codices, it's how those codices get produced in the first place. It's the entire model of writing, producing, and playtesting updates to armies years in advance of their actual distribution. Codices are literally unfit for purpose now. And 10th edition Warhammer, this latest release, that's the evidence of it. They just don't work, not with the way that Warhammer is played now. Maybe 20 years ago, there was an argument in favor of their existence when the game was primarily played by narrative gamers hooking up with unbalanced forces, drinking a beer, or in the case of my young teenage self, a whole ton of vodka, and just going at it. Who cares about the balance then? But that's not what Warhammer really is anymore. Now it aspires to be something more. It's now a competitive adversarial game that has a meta. This is the style that Games Workshop primarily support and push, but it's at odds with the way that they actually distribute the rules for the game. By the time a codex is written, reviewed, playtested, if they get playtested, and then sent to the printers, printed, and finally given a release date and shipped, it is immediately rendered irrelevant on arrival. It is a dead man walking, like a classic Dragon Ball Z villain arriving seasons later, only to be immediately defeated. The power levels are just always off. Of course they are. Nerfs and buffs will have happened in the meantime. They can never be accurate. It can never work. It's an imprecise tool by its own definition. Hell, the points values that you get in these release codices now are always out of date by the time they are released. The products just don't work. Codices are good for nothing but distributing lore. That's it. And worst of all, this problem has been solved by Games Workshop. They've just failed to realize it. In Warhammer 10th edition, every army got an index at launch. Army rules, detachment, everything that one needed to play. And that was fine. That was good. But Games Workshop need to go further. Instead of gearing up for one big massive codex release for every single army once across the new edition, they should instead simply update these indexes with more detachments and spread those new detachments out across the year. A new detachment every few months, keeping players invested in their armies, looking forward to new updates, to try new ways of playing, to encourage buying new models. This is a sort of FOMO, but like good FOMO? The type of FOMO Games Workshop aren't used to. It's not reliant on trying to sell giant army boxes or force a mandatory book purchase or simply exploit the player base. Instead, it's simply saying, here are some new rules to play with your army. Come check it out. It'll cost you nothing. You might want to buy something new, but hey, isn't this fun? It's the carrot, not the stick. And not only is 10th edition Warhammer perfect for such a business model, but Games Workshop even have an app that these new rules could easily be distributed onto the player base, guaranteeing that everyone gets them. They've built the autobahns. Drive the cars down, for God's sake. This would be perfect. Everything is in place for it. But Games Workshop just haven't done it. Instead, they are still married to the codex system. But every time a new codex batch comes out, it reflects a meta context of a year ago. Every time they release new books, they're not fit for purpose. They're just doing damage to the game. They're alienating players. It's harming Warhammer. I think half the Genestealer Cult Codex community right now are on suicide watch. And yet, Games Workshop right now are writing next year's codices. God help them, it'll be the last full year of Warhammer 10th edition, and they're writing for a world where these two new codices have come out and also been balanced and had updates done to them. We don't know what they are. We don't know what that looks like. So Games Workshop need to move to free rules, distributed digitally and with optional physical lore books or rule collections when they're done in a big old annual, and just simply get off the codex system. Think of this video like an intervention on a heroin addict, except in this case, the addict is a major billion-dollar corporation, and the heroin are useless books that are only good for lore, but otherwise just a whole lot of wasted dead trees. It's possible to do. So many other war games do this. Carnivale, One Piece Rules, Malifaux, Infinity, Star Wars Legion, Shatterpoint, even Mantic Games do as well with their Warhammer replacement game Firefight, which I am reviewing this month. Check out my bonus video on my Patreon at patreon.com/discourseminiatures for an entire library of video reviews of war games and RPGs. You'll also get a free war game with full digital rules, live streams, a fun hobby community, and ultimately help me continue to produce videos, because without Patreon, I simply couldn't. And hopefully Games Workshop take all this advice to heart, because I think Warhammer would be a lot better if the rules were free and distributed much differently. And a massive thanks to my patrons, especially CryptoKev, and I'll catch y'all next time. Bye-bye!